Hi there, my name's Alana, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Natasha Denona Retro Palette. Now, this palette is full of burgundies, dusty pinks, mauves, sort of a fall take on a romantic pink palette. Now, there's definitely some pretty soft pink looks you can get in there, but there's lots and lots in burgundy, which to me is a wonderful way to sort of deepen up a look or deepen up an eyeshadow palette as we transition into fall. Now, I have to be honest, when I saw this palette released, there's only one thing that came to mind, and that is Modern Renaissance. Now, a really quick look. I'm not gonna spend too much time in this video comparing the two, but at first I thought that Modern Renaissance and Retro were going to be sort of very similar. You know, you do have all those burgundy shades in Modern Renaissance, but Modern Renaissance really is more of a burgundy and gold with a little bit of pink. This really is a pink palette. So this is one of those things that when I saw the release, I thought of it, but then when I had a chance to really look at it, I realized that they actually didn't have as much in common as I thought they did. But that's okay, she's still beautiful. She's going back there for the remainder of the video. So I'm gonna go through a couple of sort of base facts about this palette, and then we are going to do this eye look. I am of course wearing this makeup on my face today. We're gonna take a look at some swatches, and then I'm gonna share with you some final thoughts. So let's get into it. So off the bat, this is Natasha's midi size. I love the midi size. It retails at 85 Canadian dollars. I believe it's 65 US. And honestly, the midi size is my favorite. Now I have the Biba palette, and I was able to buy that because I had some gift cards, but at the full size palette, $170, that is a ton of money on an eyeshadow palette. And I just think something that most consumers aren't going to A, be able to purchase, or B, get a ton of use out of. I really do like these smaller palettes. We're gonna get into this one in a moment, retailing around 25 US, 33 Canadian, I believe. But to me, the midi palette at that 65, 85 price point, you get tons of colors to choose from, you get a good pan size. If you are a makeup connoisseur like myself, you're probably not hitting pan on a ton of products anyways. So I think this is the perfect combination of options, size, and price. My favorite palette size that Natasha releases, and I would love to see her do Biba in this size, just putting it out there. So a couple of other things about the Retro palette. So when I saw the Retro palette, in terms of Natasha's palettes, of course I thought of her iconic Love palette. But when you take a look at the two of them, Love is a lot more vibrant, a lot more punchy shades in there, whereas Retro a lot more muted, kind of dusty pinks, dusty rose, dusty kind of light purples, much more wearable in my opinion for every day. So there were two things in the description on her website that really got me thinking. So I'm gonna read directly from her website. The continuation of the best-selling mini retro eyeshadow palette, so we're gonna talk about that in a moment, featuring 15 romantic burgundy and mauve shades combines with gray browns, taupes, dusty roses, and vintage pinks. Perfect to create retro-inspired looks, the Retro eyeshadow palette is the retro version of the cult favorite Glam eyeshadow palette. Now, when I saw this release, I wasn't thinking about Glam at all. And Glam is such a beautiful, kind of like muted golds, grays, taupey silvers. But now that she mentions it, when you kind of bring it together, I can definitely get that vibe. It's sort of wearable. You know, I'd say that both these palettes are very wearable. So I didn't really think about the Glam palette when I saw its release. I of course was thinking of Mini Retro. Now when you look at the shades in Mini Retro, you've got this gorgeous sort of shimmery green, sort of olive kind of like gray shade here. And I was picturing all of these sort of salmon and greens. I wasn't thinking dusty pinks, dusty purples. Like these two palettes, they don't even look like cousins. Like they're not twins, they're not sisters, they're not cousins, they both have some shimmers and some pinks. So I do find that bit a little bit odd. I think it would actually just make more sense if it was called like the Pink Glam palette, because I think these two palettes have a lot more in common. Forget the size, I just mean the kind of the tones and kind of what you can do with it. And it's actually kind of interesting when you take a look at what you imagine the palette would be, because this is not at all what I imagined the palette to be when I saw this iconic Mini Retro when I heard that they were expanding on the Mini Retro. But at the same time, let me remind you what she did with Zendo. Now I actually bought this palette and didn't get around to reviewing it, so sorry. If you want my review on Zendo, let me know. But when you look at Zendo, again, mini Zendo, kind of muted, very pretty, kind of actually mini Zendo and mini Retro, kind of got a lot going on in common. But then you look at the Zendo palette she released, and there's all these like blues and like greens in it, and it didn't really make any sense to me. So I think that for myself, and I think for us as consumers, we have to stop thinking about her expansion of a mini palette into a full-size palette as them being sisters, because they're just not. So now that I've kind of got that out of the way, as much as I want to compare these two palettes and think about this palette in the context of its mini version, I'm just going to I'm not going to throw it because that would be like a hate crime against makeup, but I'm just going to toss it aside because I think that we really just need to look at this palette as a standalone palette, because I think that is the best way that we are going to understand and appreciate her for what she is. So before we get into the swatches on this palette, I just really wanted to note that Helio, which is the metallic taupe nude, and Amara, which is a matte medium cool vintage rosewood, are both from the Lila palette. So there are some shadow repeats, just so you're aware, but let's get into doing my makeup, and then we're gonna take a look at the swatches and share some thoughts overall on the palette. So we're gonna be starting with Maud all over my lid using Rephr 28, which is a shader brush. Maud is sort of a creamy pink. Oh, and so I went to look in the mirror, but I need to remove this part because this is actually my first time using the palette. So, okay, now I can see myself. This will be better. Using Rephr 15, we're going to use Andy as our sort of crease transition shade, and this seems like a slightly gold sort of mauvey pink, and it just looks so pretty. Oh my gosh, this is so pretty and romantic. Okay, this is looking on the eye not at all like how it looks in the pan. It's really coming up this almost like a vibrant pastel purple, and I really like it, but it looks so much more muted on the pan. Okay, it's still gonna be a beautiful look. That is just not what I was expecting. We're actually gonna bring a little bit of that onto my lid. I think it's gonna be really, because I think it's gonna be a really pretty base for some of the shimmers. Now, to deepen up my crease, I'm gonna use the same brush, and I'm going to use Groove, which is, or it looks like a matte burgundy, but we will see how it looks on my eye. Okay, this is interesting because in the pan it looks burgundy, but it's really going just more of a deep purple. So we're just gonna put that in the outer third and just kind of in the crease. I'm gonna do that again on this side. And now I'm gonna grab a clean blending brush. This is a Rephr 27, and we're just gonna blend everything in so it's a little more soft and diffused before we go in with those shimmer shades. Okay, so let's go in with Psychedelic. This shade has been calling me all day. It's a super, super shimmery. I'm thinking it's gonna be a bit more of a topper, and I'm gonna do that all over my lid. Oh, wow. Okay, that is pretty. Shades like this, I definitely like to use my finger for. So I'm gonna blend in everything again, just so it's not too harsh. And then I'm gonna use this brush that I've been using before, dip it into Andy, pinch it, and just drag it under my eyes a touch. I'm also going to go in with Glitz over here, which is another shimmery one, with just a little pop under my brow. A little pop on the inner. Okay, so I'm gonna pop on some winged liner and mascara, and then we're gonna talk some more about this palette. On the top row of the palette from left to right, we have Glitz, which is described as a duochrome, cool baby pink with a champagne shift. Then we have Andy, which is a matte taupe lilac cream powder. Then we have Jude, which is metallic warm taupe, followed by Maud, which is a matte off-white with pink undertone. And finally, Vivian, a matte light pink nude cream to powder formula. Moving on to the second row of this palette from left to right, first up we have Groove, which is a matte medium dark warm maroon, followed by Opart, a matte dark taupe
Cream to Powder. Then we have Psychedelic, a warm baby pink with multicolor sparkler topper, followed by Go-Go, a matte medium warm rose cream powder. Sounds like Go-Go boots. And finally, we have Patty, a metallic medium nude rose copper. For the final row of this palette, we have Swing, which is a metallic medium dark cool maroon, followed by Nude Mauve, which is a matte medium light neutral nude. Next, we have Rebellion, which is a matte medium burgundy cream to powder, followed by Helio, which is a metallic taupe nude, which is available in the Lila palette, and Amara, which is a matte medium cool vintage rosewood, also in the Lila palette. Now, I wanted to take just a moment to address the formulas. I know that some people don't like the cream to powder, but I have to say that Andy is one of my favorite shadows in the palette. At first, I was a little bit unsure about how to approach this formula because I don't have a ton of experience with Natasha's cream to powder formula, but it was really creamy, easy to blend. I thought it really added to the look. My only worry is that, for most eyeshadow palettes, you can get years and years of use out of them, even if the packaging says that you shouldn't. But I am curious to see if a cream to powder shadow goes rancid or if it has the same shelf life. But I guess only time is going to tell on that because, again, this is a newer formula for me. But I did think Andy was really pretty. That was a particular favorite of mine from the first row. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you was what the mini retro palette looks like. And as you can see, that color story is so different. You've got that sort of beautiful pearly green. You've got that olivey taupe. Now, you do have some pinks and some shimmers, but those pinks are a lot more salmon rather than dusty rose. So I just wanted to show you that for comparison.
So we have put the makeup on my face. We've looked at the swatches. We've chatted a little bit about what's going on behind the palette. And I want to share some of my final thoughts with you. First up, I do think that this palette is more comparable to Glam if you think about it as a pink Glam palette rather than the mini retro. Now, I did include some swatches of the mini retro and you can see that they're just, one of them's adopted, okay? That's all I'm saying, one of them is adopted. Now, as we look through this palette, a couple of observations. A number of the shadows pull a lot more purple and a lot more vibrant than I expected. The palette overall actually also pulls a fair bit darker. Now, I think there's a lot of beautiful looks that you can make with this palette. I can't wait to keep on playing with it. But at first glance, there's a lot more to this palette than meets the eye. Now, it is pink. It is dusty pinks and mauves and shimmers, and these are some of my favorite colors to wear all year round. So I can't wait to keep on playing with this palette. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see a 3 looks, 1 palette, because I actually think the looks that you can get with this are absolutely endless. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I mean, look, Natasha Denona has a beautiful eyeshadow formula. The fact that she's released this palette in a midi size, I think makes it really accessible but yet versatile at the same time. And I think it really has a lot going for it. I will say, in my heart, I always want to say that Biba is my favorite Natasha Denona palette, but I think it actually might be Glam. I'm a little bit more of a neutral girl, but I love that this is really like a pink neutral palette. In a lot of ways, as I reach across my desk, I've got like so much eyeshadow in front of me. It really does feel like the neutral version of Love, which, by the way, I always want to call this the Lover palette because of Taylor Swift, but it really does feel like you've just kind of brought down the saturation, and it's like Love and Glam had a baby, and she is this beautiful, beautiful pinky mauve. So I'm gonna leave this link down below along with some other videos that I think you might enjoy. Overall, I'm really happy with this palette. Once I got over the initial shock of being like, that is not a larger size of the mini retro. So, love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Mwah.